Welcome to part 3F of this Peatland ACTION mini-series on how to complete the spatial data template. In this episode, I'll be discussing the unrestorable peat layer and how to add a feature in QGIS. Here you can see we have a spatial data template opened in QGIS, and we've previously added the site outline and some features into the other restoration layers in other videos in the part 3 of this series. Updates to the unrestorable peat layer were one of the main changes in the latest revision of the template, and this is highlighted in the Spatial Data Template Guidance PDF. As we're using QGIS for these videos, I've opened the Spatial Data Template for QGIS. However, there is a guidance PDF document for ArcGIS as well. If you scroll down, you can see that it gives you an overview on how the project file is linked with the geopackage and also provides a recommended workflow. Underneath this, you have your change list of the updates made in the most recent revision, and you can see there that the first update is the unrestorable peat layer. As per the guidance, it's now mandatory to use this layer to record areas where restoration cannot be carried out or where it is not necessary. This might include areas with access issues or where features are naturally revegetating. Historically, this is how the unrestorable peat layer has been used. However, we now request that additional data is provided regarding any areas that are to be removed from the restoration footprint. As we can see, it goes on to state that the layer should be used when the restoration footprint has been clipped back from 50 metres, and reasons should be provided. The ambition here is to reduce the back and forth communication between the applicant and the data and evidence team at QA stage, as there are often concerns of undermapping which could be easily resolved by providing additional information when submitting the application. Furthermore, receiving the areas to be trimmed out of the restoration footprint provides resilience for the future, as it will allow us to be able to modify the buffer distance for outputs as and when required. You'll see that it also pays reference to the notes layer, which is another new layer that we've reintroduced into the template. This is just a free text point layer which can be used to capture field observations and information about why features aren't being restored. There's no need to duplicate the information between the notes layer and the unrestorable peat layer, but please ensure that one of these layers is populated. Going back to the GIS window, you can find a list of the reasons for unrestorable peat in the Lookup Unrestorable Reason table in the Lookup Tables group of the GIS template. Right-click and open Attribute Table to view the different reasons available. The unrestorable peat layer has got polygon geometry, so it's digitised in the same way that the area-based restoration, forest to bog, bare peat stabilisation and site outline layers are. So first, to add a feature, make sure the layer is selected in the Layers panel and then toggle editing mode on by clicking the pencil icon in the top toolbar, or alternatively right-click and go to toggle editing. You'll see that a new icon appears to be active to the right of the pencil icon, and this is to add a polygon feature icon. Select this and you can start digitising your polygon in the map below. You may wish to bring in supporting layers to help you map your unrestorable peat layer. This includes things like water networks. With watercourse links visible on the mapping, you'll be able to easily see where the restoration footprint would extend beyond an area of a lake or a river, and you can use this to create an area of unrestorable peat. So for instance, here I can see that there is a watercourse, and I know that the restoration footprint must be trimmed back to that watercourse. So I can just add in a feature like so, and I will set the site ID to 1 and the reason for ground too soft wet, or you can use other and specify that it's past a watercourse if you wish. And then press OK, and that's a new feature in the unrestorable peat layer. Save the layer edits by clicking the floppy disk symbol in the top toolbar. Once you've digitised everything in your layer, you can toggle editing off. As well as digitising boundary features that may trim your restoration footprint, it's important to review any features which have been identified as unrestorable or where restoration isn't necessary. In order to add a linear feature from the restoration lines layer to the unrestorable peat layer, you first have to match the geometry of the target layer. The unrestorable peat layer has a polygon geometry, so you'd need to buffer the line to create a polygon. Zoom in to the feature that you want to add to the unrestorable peat layer. Select the restoration lines layer in the Layers panel and use the Select tools to select the feature that you want to buffer. Then go to the vector menu in the toolbar at the top and go to Geoprocessing Tools and Buffer. Select Buffer and a dialog box such as this will appear. The input layer should be the layer that you have selected in the Layers panel by default, and you want to make sure that you tick the Selected Features Only box, otherwise buffers will be produced for every feature within the layer. Next, you want to modify the distance from 10 meters to something slightly smaller, so I'm going to put 5, and then you can run the buffer tool. You'll see here in the geoplan below that a new polygon feature has been created by buffering the line by 5 meters. So I'm going to close the buffer window, and you'll see that this polygon has been saved to the buffered layer at the top of my layers panel. And if I hover over this symbol here, it shows that it's a temporary scratch layer, so the contents of this layer will be discarded after the project is closed. That means in order to save the features within this layer, you either have to make the layer permanent or copy the features into another permanent layer. So open up the attribute table for the buffered feature and select the feature, and you copy it using the copy symbol. That's the two papers overlaid by one another. Go down to the Unrestorable peat layer and open the attribute table for that layer. And with editing mode toggled on, you can paste the feature directly into the table using the clipboard icon. You might get a dialog box such as this appear, and that's because the reason, which is a mandatory field, is not a column in the restoration lines table. So use the drop down and to access the different reasons and choose which one is most appropriate. So I'm going to suggest that it is too wet or soft to restore here, and then you can click OK and save the layer edits by clicking the floppy disk symbol in the top toolbar. As we've copied over the feature from the buffered layer, I can now remove this from the layers panel, so I'm going to right click and go to remove and select OK. But then I'm going to deselect everything using the deselect features from all layers option in the top toolbar, and you can see here that whilst we have the unrestorable peat layer, we also still have the drain feature as per this purple line in the restoration lines layer. This means that this feature will be targeted for restoration on site, and it'll also be adding to the total lengths which are used for the costing of the project. Therefore, we need to remove this feature if that area has been identified as being unrestorable. So toggle editing mode on for the restoration lines layer, and using the select tools from the toolbar, select the feature you want to delete. Once it's selected, the trash icon in the toolbar should be active, and you can click this and opt to delete the one feature. Save the layer edits using the floppy disk symbol and toggle editing off if you don't need to make any more changes to that layer. As mentioned previously, not all of the features in the unrestorable peat layer will automatically be trimmed out of the footprint when you run the footprint buffer tool. Only those selected will be removed. So this here is an example of unrestorable peat which should not be removed from the restoration footprint. Please see the other videos on the NatureSculpt Peatland Action webpage for information on how to generate your restoration footprint, how to undertake some self-QA, and how to set up the fresh template.